So I wasn't planning to watch Warrington Amagasa. I had actually agreed to do something possibly slightly less cool in terms of the boxing world, which was to go and see The Jungle Book with Mrs. Gossip tonight. But fortunately, I made it home for the final bell. Sorry, I made it home for the opening bell, shall I say, and I was able to watch the entirety of Warrington versus Amagasa. Now, let me say, first and foremost, I've got to give some credit to Josh Warrington, because Warrington's a fighter I've been critical of in the past, and I think he won this fight fairly comfortably. On my scorecard, I actually scored 10 rounds to 2 in favour of Warrington. I gave Amagasa the 5th and the 6th round. There were a few other close rounds that I could have given to Amagasa, but I had it 10 rounds to 2. I could have accepted 9 rounds to 3. I could have accepted 8 rounds to 4. But on balance, I think 10 rounds to 2 was the safest bet. I believe one of the judges scored the fight 120 to 107 in favour of Warrington, which is absolutely bizarre. Because, I don't know, for me the 5th and 6th rounds were quite clear Amagasa rounds. And I don't know how, the judges had Amagasa losing those, and I don't know where the 10-8 round came from either. I didn't think Warrington was so dominant he should be winning one of the rounds by 10-8, and judges scored it 120-107, which suggests he's won all 12 of the rounds, which I can't see, and also won by 10-8. So it's very bizarre. I don't understand the scoring, but regardless, credit to Josh Warrington. I thought in the early rounds his footwork was good. He was able to get on Amagasa's chest, and he was able to unload punches inside the pocket, bring the pressure, force Amagasa around the ring, work the body. His jab was decent for a sort of fighter. You look at these two guys, Amagasa must have been 4, 5, 6 inches bigger than Josh Warrington, and I thought Warrington's jab was landing on point. And he was grinding him down with the pressure, hitting to the body, landing with hooks to the head. I thought Warrington was doing some good work, so credit has to go to Josh Warrington. I'll tell you 2 people who credit should not go to tonight. The first is Amagasa, and the second is the Sky commentary team. I do not know what fight they were watching. Into the last round they were still saying this is up in the air, this could go either way, who will win the fight. If you guys follow me on Twitter, if you don't, hit me up at Boxing Gossip. But I was tweeting my scores throughout the fight, and I was at it 8 rounds to 2, 9 rounds to 2, 10 rounds to 2. I was getting Warrington pulling further and further away. These commentators seemed to think this was a 50-50 fight. I don't know what they were doing. They were seeming to think that Amagasa was having huge spells of effectiveness. For me, they were just calling this fight wrongly. They were scoring rounds to Amagasa that for me were clear Warrington rounds. So I don't know what the tactic is. Usually you'd think Sky commentators would be trying to make out that the Sky fighter would be more dominant. Maybe they were trying to make out that it's a good fight. Maybe they were aware that this bill was going to get criticism. I know a lot of boxing people didn't even bother to watch the bill. It was deemed to be such a dodgy card. But for whatever reason, they were making this out to be a real tight fight. I think I heard constant references to Amagasa's power, to Amagasa's world class. For me, the commentary was bizarre. I thought Warrington was doing a real job on Amagasa. As I say, I had it 10 rounds to 2. I didn't have it close whatsoever. And I think halfway through the fight, they were saying that, I think after 8 rounds or 9 rounds, they were saying they actually had Amagasa up. So I didn't see that at all. And neither did the 3 judges who were scoring at ringside. So I don't know what the Sky commentary team were doing, what their game plan was, but that was bizarre. Amagasa himself, I got to say, I thought his performance was very weak tonight. He's known as the guy who dropped Rigondo twice. I watched that Rigondo knockdowns back when I was doing my pre-fight prediction video, and I said neither of those knockdowns, they were both, especially the first one was a genuine knockdown, don't get me wrong, they weren't the most convincing of knockdowns. For me, Rigo was more sort of off balance for the first one. He was maybe showboating a bit with his movement because he was finding the fight so easy. And the second one, he was more wrestled to the ground. And I've got to say, how Amagasa got down super bantamweight, I don't know, because he is a truly monstrous featherweight, let alone a super bantamweight. But in that fight, to me, he looked very sloppy. And one of the things I did highlight in my pre-fight video, not to blow my own horn here, is like, Amagasa has literally no jab. And if you're a guy who is so big and so lanky for your weight division, a key thing you need to bring to the table is a jab. And for me, Amagasa's jab was bang average. You know, he was pushing it out. He looked like he was punching through water. It was slow. It had very, very limited snap to it. His inclination was not to use the jab, which could have been his key to winning this fight. Instead, his inclination was to throw these wide, looping punches that were so slow, you know, so slow, so predictable, and really slappy. You know, he was really slapping straight arm slaps rather than snappy hooks and, you know, snappy punches in that sense. And for me, he was ripe for being countered. You know, you're talking here about a guy who's a lanky guy, 6 inches taller than his opponent, who simply could not establish his jab and was throwing these long, wide, looping punches. You know, Warrington was ripe for countering him straight down the middle. And you saw that with Warrington. Warrington's jab was landing continuously. At certain points, he was busting Amagasa up with it. And when Warrington started throwing the power punches, Amagasa literally had no defence. The guy was so open, it was untrue. So, for me, there was many, many criticisms with Amagasa in this fight. No jab, no defence, slow, wide punching that was just so easy to counter down the middle. I thought his footwork was sloppy, and, you know, the commentators kept saying, oh, isn't he unorthodox, isn't he awkward? You know, I just thought he was really, really poor, you know, really poor. Sometimes this unorthodox thing can be thrown about too much. If a fighter is just making bang average mistakes, it can be because they're bang average rather than they're some high level unorthodox fighter, you know. And for me, he was very, very, very bang average. I heard Jamie McDonald was fighting with, I heard Jamie McDonald was sparring with Warrington in the lead up to this fight. And, you know, Warrington would have probably been given much more of a test by Jamie McDonald against Amagasa. And Amagasa would do well to look at Jamie McDonald, because that's the kind of style you actually need when you're a tall, lanky guy at the weight. Amagasa's one effective punch for me was the sort of long uppercut that he was throwing from range. That was a decent punch, but it was probably more effective because he was throwing it down the centre of his opponent rather than bringing it wide and slapping with it. So all in all, I thought it was a real average performance from Amagasa. I thought he was really ungamely, really sloppy, and I thought Warrington looked a class above, really, compared to him. And that's why I couldn't understand what the Sky commentators were going on about remotely with how close they scored this fight. For me, it was relatively easy work from Josh Warrington. As for Amagasa, he did have a period in the 5th and 6th round, and he was most effective when he could keep Josh Warrington at range. You know, he certainly came on strong in those rounds and led with power shots, and I don't know whether he caught Warrington once or twice and Warrington felt a little bit of power from a guy who's a much bigger man and maybe was sort of perturbed for a few rounds. But that was when Amagasa was most effective. I think what Amagasa lacked was that fast footwork or the sort of fast jab to keep Warrington on the outside. Had he done that, it would have been a much, much more difficult fight for Josh. But Warrington was actually the better jabber from the outside, which is absolutely bizarre. For me, Warrington put in a good performance. He's an improving fighter. I do have concerns about him stepping up from, I guess Amagasa's fringe world level, but stepping up to true world level. For me, Warrington's lack of power, and let's be honest, he hit Amagasa with everything tonight. He hit him over and over and over again with a guy who had absolutely no defence, and he couldn't drop him. And also, for me, when Amagasa was able to fight at range, which he should have done a lot more, he was picking Warrington off and potentially hurting Warrington. I think a guy like Lee Selby, with his movement and with his long range game, could, if that fight comes next, could absolutely embarrass a Warrington. It wouldn't surprise me if that is just a one-sided hammering from a technician like Selby. But for me, Warrington is improving. I think he's found his level. it's impressive that he's beating a guy at Fringe World level. In a performance like this, am I seeing him as the kind of guy who's going to move from that Fringe World level to true world level? Probably not. Unfortunately, whilst he's a likeable guy, whilst he's got a big crowd following, and whilst he, is an entertaining fighter to some extent with that kind of Ricky Hatton style, if you like, he just lacks the boxing fundamentals. For me, he's open from range and will simply be picked off from long distance. That presser style, I don't see him imposing that against a guy like Lee Selby, a guy like Lomachenko, a guy like Oscar Valdez. You look what Lee Selby, and Lee Selby hasn't looked great recently in fights against Montiel, in fights against Eric Hunter, but you look what Lee Selby did to a guy like Gradovets, and I think he could have a similar performance, a guy like he did to Gradovets or like he did to Brunker when he fights a guy like Josh Warrington, who's more come forward, one-dimensional presser fighter. So that's my thoughts. All in all, I think a good night from Warrington. I'd give Warrington a 7 out of 10 for his performance. I thought it was good. Amagasa, I'm going to give a 2 out of 10. No, I'll give him a 3 out of 10 actually. He showed heart, he stayed the distance, getting hit over and over again. But, so ungamely and so open defensively. And, one of the worst jabs you'll ever see for a man of that height, Perez weight class. Warrington 7 out of 10, Amagasa 3 out of 10. The Sky commentary team, 0 out of 10. Real poor performance from those guys. How they were calling this fight so close, I don't know. I really don't know. Anyway, hope you've enjoyed my post-fight wrap-up. If we go Warrington-Selby next, I'll definitely be picking Selby. I just think he's got so much more class. I think he's so much more technically capable. And I think he could still box a guy like Warrington's ears off. But, Warrington deserves his credit for the performance tonight. Amagasa was a step up. Fringe world level. He dropped Rigo twice. He's been in with that sort of company. And I thought Warrington did a good job on him all in all. So, fair play to Warrington. Do leave your comments below, guys. How did you score the fight? Let me know how many rounds you gave to Amagasa. What did you think of the Sky commentary team? What did you think of Warrington's performance? Let me know who you'd pick in Selby versus Warrington. If you've enjoyed this, do hit the thumbs up. If you're new to the channel or you haven't done before, please press subscribe. Links to my social media are going to be in the description, but follow me on Twitter @BoxingGossip or add me on Facebook. Thanks a lot.